Hey guys, tonight we are diving deep into the fragrant, slightly grimy world of your very own medieval pocket. Imagine you're a farmer, sun on your face, dirt under your nails, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive the next plague. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let us know where and when you're tuning in from down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. All right, feel that. The gentle sway at your hip. That's your world, in miniature, bumping softly against your leg as you trudge back from the fields. The sun, a hazy orange disk, is starting to dip below the thatch roofs of your village, painting the sky in hues you don't really have time to appreciate. You're tired, bone tired. Your back aches from bending over rows of, well, let's be generous and call them promising crops. Your hands are rough, calloused, stained with the good earth that both feeds you and, frankly, works you to the nub. This isn't some romantic tapestry version of medieval life. This is the muddy, smelly, and often monotonous reality. And right there, tied securely to your belt, is your constant companion, your pouch. It's not a pocket, not as we think of it. Pockets sewn into garments, those wonderfully convenient little hidey holes, are largely a fancy of the future. For you, a humble farmer in, say, the 13th or 14th century, your carrying capacity is external. It's a pouch, probably made of leather, tough, durable, and capable of withstanding the daily grind. Maybe it's a soft deerskin or a coarser cowhide. Perhaps, if you're a bit more fortunate or have a knack for bartering, it's got a simple drawstring closure. If you're really down on your luck, it might just be a square of cloth, knotted at the corners and looped through your belt. Whatever its form, it's an extension of your very being, a little sack of necessities, hopes, and perhaps a secret or two. You probably don't think much about it, not consciously. It's just there. Like an extra limb you've learned to rely on without a second thought. Imagine reaching for it now. The feel of the material under your fingertips? Is it smooth from wear, or still a bit stiff and new? Does it have a particular smell? Probably a mix of leather, earth, sweat, and a faint, lingering aroma of whatever you last had in there. Maybe a bit of stale bread, or the metallic tang of a coin. It's not exactly Chanel, no. 5, is it more like? Eau de serfdom. But it's your smell, your life. This little bag, this medieval man purse or peasant pack, is what we're going to be rummaging through. Very, very gently, over the course of our journey together. Think of this as your personal inventory screen. Before such things were cool in video games, we're going to peer inside, not just your pouch, but the idea of the medieval pouch itself, and explore the kinds of things you, our hardworking farmer, might be carrying, and perhaps what your slightly more well-off, or indeed much poorer, neighbors might have in theirs. It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? What does a person from so long ago deem essential enough to carry on their person every single day? We have our smartphones, our wallets, our keys, our little trinity of modern essentials. What were the medieval equivalents? That's the mystery we're going to unravel. So, in the coming explorations, we'll delve into the practicalities. We'll almost certainly talk about money, or the lack thereof, the weight of a few carefully hoarded coins, the jingle they might make, or perhaps the smooth feel of a barter token. What kind of currency did you even use? Was it grand silver pennies, or were you more likely to be dealing in, well, chickens? Then there are the tools, not the big ones you leave in the field, your plow, your scythe, but the small everyday implements, a trusty knife, perhaps indispensable for everything from cutting your bread to whittling a stick during a rare moment of idleness. What else might a farmer need close at hand? We'll consider the possibilities, from the mundane to the surprisingly ingenious. And what about sustenance? You're out in the fields from dawn till dusk. Surely you carry a little something to keep body and soul together. A hunk of coarse bread, a piece of dried fruit, maybe a sliver of cheese if times are good. We'll sniff around that particular topic, so to speak. Personal items. 2. Things that aren't strictly for survival, but speak more to your identity, your beliefs, your small comforts. A simple wooden toggle. You carved yourself. A smooth pebble from a riverbed that just felt nice in your hand. Perhaps a token of faith, a pilgrim's badge, a roughly made cross. These are the items that whisper stories. It's a well-known historical fact that personal adornment and small trinkets were common across social classes, though their materials and craftsmanship varied wildly. Your pouch might not hold gold, but it holds yours, Noel. We might even touch upon some of the more unexpected contents, things that might surprise us. A gaming piece for a quick game of nine men's Morris when the Lord's Reeve isn't looking. A special herb for a toothache. The medieval world was full of little superstitions and practical folk remedies. It's a quirky little tidbit, but some pouches, known as almoners, were specifically designed or designated for carrying coins to give as alms to the poor, a visible sign of piety or social responsibility, though perhaps less common for a struggling farmer. And, of course, there's always room for debate. Historians still argue whether the typical contents of a peasant's pouch differed significantly from region to region across Europe, or if a sort of standard issue kit of essentials prevailed due to the shared nature of agricultural life and technology. Was your English farmer's pouch a twin to that of a French peasant? Or did local customs and available materials create a unique pocket profile? It's a delicious little puzzle. So, this pouch, this unassuming bag, is our gateway. It's a tangible link to your imagined medieval self. It's not just a container, it's a reflection of your status, your profession, your daily needs, and maybe even your secret desires. As we proceed, we'll be filling it, item by item, with possibilities. We'll weigh them in our hands, metaphorically speaking, and try to understand their significance in your world. A world so different from ours, yet connected by the simple human need to carry things. For now, just picture it hanging there, a familiar weight. Its contents are still a mystery, a soft collection of bumps and shapes felt through the worn material. What treasures, what mundane necessities, what tiny fragments of a life lie waiting within? That's what we're here to discover, nice and slow. No rush, just you, me, and the gentle, imagined rustle of your medieval pocket. And so, your hand, almost without thinking, drifts down to your side, to that reassuring weight tethered to your belt. This is it. Your constant companion, the unsung hero of your daily existence, the pouch. It's not much to look at, perhaps, not by the glittering standards of later ages, but it's yours, qui and dédé, and it's profoundly essential. You feel the material now, if you're fortunate, or perhaps a bit more established. It's leather, not the pristine factory tanned stuff of today, all uniform and smelling faintly of chemicals. No, this is leather that's lived a life even before it became your pouch. Perhaps it's deer hide, supple and soft, worn smooth in patches from constant contact with your tunic and the rhythmic sway of your hip as you walk. You can almost feel the faint grain under your fingertips, the way it's molded subtly over time, not just to its contents, but to the very curve of your body. Maybe it's a thicker, sturdier cowhide. Its surface a roadmap of little scuffs and scratches, each a tiny forgotten story. It might be dyed a deep, earthy brown with walnut husks, or a russet red from madder root. The color faded in places, deepened in others where oil from your hands has soaked in. It has a smell, too, a faint, honest scent of wood smoke, old lanolin if it's been recently treated against the damp, and just a general, comforting aroma of well-used leather. Or perhaps your pouch is cloth, good, sturdy linen, maybe woven with a satisfying, slightly coarse texture that nonetheless feels dependable. Or wool, a bit rougher, but excellent at keeping the damp out, especially if it's been fulled. You might even see the individual threads if you look closely. The slight irregularities of hand-spun yarn, the subtle variations in color that speak of natural dyes. These cloth pouches are often simpler, perhaps a testament to a more utilitarian approach, or maybe just a reflection of what's readily available. They breathe more than leather, which can be a blessing for some contents, a curse for others if a sudden downpour catches you unawares. You might have even stitched it yourself. Your own slightly uneven seams a personal touch. Now, consider its construction. It's beautifully, elegantly simple, most likely. The most common form you'll encounter is the drawstring pouch. Imagine a roughly circular or rectangular piece of that leather or fabric, with small holes or reinforced eyelets punched or stitched around the top edge. A thong of leather, or a cord of twisted flax or wool, is threaded through these holes. Pull it tight, and the top cinches closed, gathering the material into soft folds, securing whatever treasures or mundane necessities lie within. It's an ingenious design. Really, no complex clasps to break, no fussy buckles to wrestle with when your fingers are cold. Just a simple, effective pull. You might tie the ends of the drawstring into a knot, or perhaps a small curge and carved wooden or bone toggle helps keep it snug. Some fancier versions might have a flap that folds over the gathered opening, secured with another thong or a toggle, offering a little extra protection from nimble fingers or the prying eyes of, well, everyone. After all, your pouch is basically your entire life, out there for the world to sort of see. Historians still argue whether the more elaborate the closure mechanism on a pouch, the more paranoid the owner, or if it was simply a fashionable deterrent. It's a real chicken and egg situation with pickpockets. This pouch isn't just an accessory, it's an extension of your very person, worn faithfully at your belt. You probably have a sturdy leather belt, cinched around your tunic or kirtle, and the pouch itself will have one or two loops on its back, also of leather or strong cloth, through which the belt is threaded. It nestles there against your hip, a familiar pressure. When you walk, it creates a gentle, rhythmic bump, bump, bump against your leg, a subtle percussion accompanying your steps. Sometimes, if you're carrying coins or small metal objects, you'll hear a soft, muffled clinking, a tiny, personal soundtrack to your day. It's amazing how quickly you get used to that weight, that sound. You'd feel utterly naked without it, like leaving the house today without your phone, wallet, and keys, all rolled into one slightly lumpy package. Except, you know, your keys probably wouldn't be for a castle, more like a very stubborn goat. And this brings us to its crucial role, your primary carrying space. Forget pockets. Those are a luxury for a future you can't even imagine. For now, this pouch is it. This is your handbag, your wallet, your emergency kit, your snack dispenser, and sometimes, if you're particularly sentimental, your portable memory box. Everything you need to navigate your day, everything of immediate value or utility, finds its home here. It's a beautifully compact system, really. The Ötzi, the Iceman, discovered frozen in the Alps after some 5,300 years, famously had a pouch on his belt containing tinder fungus, flint, a bone awl, and other vital survival tools. That's a mainstream historical fact for you. The pouch as an ancient lifeline. Inside your own, you might have a few precious coins, their designs worn smooth from circulation, a small, much sharpened knife for cutting bread, cheese, or a stray thread, your tinderbox, of course, that essential little kit of flint, steel, and charcloth, because fire is life, and starting one from scratch without these aids is, shall we say, a deeply unrelaxing experience. Perhaps there's a comb carved from wood or bone, because even in simpler times, nobody enjoys a perpetually tangled mess. You might carry a bit of dried fruit or a hard biscuit, tucked away for when hunger pangs strike between more substantial meals. A needle and some thread are always useful for unexpected repairs. Maybe a smooth, cool stone you picked up from a riverbed, just because you like the feel of it. It's not quite a TARDIS. It's definitely bigger on the inside than it looks, but not that much bigger. You're not pulling out a hat stand, though some folks seem to try. A quirky little tidbit for you, some specialized professions had equally specialized pouches. A scholar might have a pouch sturdy enough to hold a small wax tablet and stylus, perhaps with separate compartments. An apothecary's pouch might be a marvel of tiny, individually tied leather or cloth bags within the main pouch, each holding a precious herb or mineral, smelling like a very confusing spice rack. They say some were even lined with specially treated materials to prevent cross-contamination, or perhaps just to stop their more volatile concoctions from eating through the leather. Probably the latter, if we're being honest. The contents are a jumble, a microcosm of your daily needs and little indulgences. It's an intimate space. In a way, reaching into your pouch is an automatic, unthinking gesture. Your fingers knowing by touch alone whether they're brushing against the cool metal of a coin, the rough surface of a tinder fungus, or the surprisingly sharp edge of that spare arrowhead you keep meaning to fletch. It's your personal archive, your immediate world, all contained within this simple, unassuming bag. And yes, things can fall out. The drawstring might loosen, or a hole might wear through an unseen corner. It's the original, oops, I dropped my almacord, entire worldly savings moment, often discovered miles down the track, with much wailing and gnashing of teeth. So, you learn to check it, to secure it, to treat it with the respect it deserves. This humble, essential pouch. It's more than just a container. It's your link to survival, to commerce, to the small comforts that make your often uncomfortable life just a little bit more bearable. And as the last echoes of that evening song fade away, and your muscles thrum with the day's honest work, remember those aching hands we talked about earlier. Well, there's one companion that rarely leaves their side, or at least is never far from reach. It's not your phone, though, let's be honest, you'd probably feel just as lost without it in this era as you do without your glowing rectangle today. No, this is something far more fundamental. It's your knife. You feel for it now, a familiar weight usually tucked into your belt or a simple sheath. It's not a weapon, not primarily, though it could serve in a pinch. Much like a particularly stern look can sometimes deter an overly enthusiastic door-to-door salesperson. This is your all-purpose tool, your third hand, the quiet, unassuming enabler of your daily existence. Its absence would be more than an inconvenience. It would be a crippling disadvantage. Imagine trying to get through a single day without one. No, don't. It's too stressful. You probably wouldn't survive past breakfast, or at least, breakfast would be a very chunky affair. You use it for everything. Everything. When you wake, It might be the first thing you reach for after splashing some cold water on your face. Perhaps there's a bit of twine that needs cutting to open a sack of grain, or a stubborn bit of dried mud to scrape from your boots before you even think about the day's main tasks. When it's time to eat, that same knife slices your coarse bread, maybe a hunk of cheese if you're lucky, or the vegetables you pulled from the garden, those lovely earthy-smelling roots we pictured earlier. If there's a bit of dried meat, it's your knife that coaxes it into manageable pieces. There's no neatly packaged, pre-sliced anything here. This is DIY dining at its most essential. Out in the fields, its uses multiply. A broken tool handle. Your knife is there to whittle down a new piece of wood, to shape it, to make it fit. It scores, it shaves, it pokes. You might use it to cut away blighted leaves from a struggling plant, or to harvest a few herbs growing wild by the wayside for the evening meal. If a leather strap on your harness frays, your knife trims the ragged edges, or helps you punch a new hole for a makeshift repair. It's the original multi-tool. Really, just without the little corkscrew you never use, or that tiny, utterly baffling fish scaler. Though a bottle opener would have been a nice medieval innovation, one imagines. Even for something as simple as mending clothes, your knife might come into play, perhaps to sharpen a wooden needle, or to cut a new patch from a piece of scrap fabric. If, heaven forbid, you get a nasty splinter, a common occurrence with all that rough-hewn wood around, it's your knife. Carefully, carefully. That helps to coax it out. It's an extension of your will, a simple machine that translates intent into action with a directness we've almost forgotten. Now, let's look at this indispensable companion. It's not fancy. Forget ornate carvings or jewel-encrusted hilts. Those are for the lords and ladies, or perhaps for showing off at the annual fair, if you even have such a knife. Yours is plain, practical. The blade is likely made of iron, or a very basic form of steel if the local smith is particularly skilled or lucky with his batch. It's probably a bit stained, maybe a touch rusty in places if you haven't been diligent with your pig fat rub-downs. You can smell the faint, metallic tang, mixed with the scent of oil in whatever you last cut. It holds an edge, but not like modern super steels. You're sharpening it constantly, a rhythmic rasp against a good, smooth stone, a sound as familiar as the birdsong at dawn. This constant maintenance is just part of its life, and yours. It's a well-established fact that by this time, iron had largely superseded bronze for everyday tools like knives, making them more accessible, if not always of stellar quality. The common form is straightforward a fixed blade, meaning the blade and handle are one solid piece, or at least the blade extends substantially into the handle. Folding knives, while they existed, were often seen as less robust for the kind of daily, sometimes forceful, tasks you're performing. You need something that won't buckle when you're trying to pry something open or cut through a tough root. The blade itself might be what we'd call a drop point or a spear point. Generally good for all-around use. Not too long, not too short. Just right. A comfortable working length, easy to control. The handle is probably wood. Simple, readily available, easily shaped. You can feel the grain of it, worn smooth by years of your own grip. A custom fit, earned through labor. It might be oak or ash, or whatever local timber is hardy and plentiful. Perhaps it's bone, if you're a bit more prosperous or had a good find, offering a bit more durability and a different, cooler feel in the hand. Antler is another possibility, naturally textured for a secure grip. These aren't just materials, they're connections to the world around you. This focus on natural, locally sourced materials is something we almost romanticize now with our artisan. Small batch? Well, everything. Back then, it was just Tuesday. There's a charming, though perhaps slightly morbid, little quirk from some regions. a lesser-known tidbit, it was sometimes considered bad luck to be gifted a knife. The belief was that the sharp edge could sever the friendship. So, if someone gave you a knife, you'd always give them a small coin in return, symbolically buying it to keep the good vibes flowing. You wouldn't want to accidentally unfriend your only neighbor with a good whetstone, would you? The way the blade is fixed into the handle, the tang, is crucial. Cheaper knives might have a partial tang, where the metal of the blade only goes a short way into the handle. Yours, hopefully, has a more substantial one, maybe even a full tang, for strength. Though, historians still argue whether the prevalence of simpler tang designs in common agricultural knives was purely an economic consideration to save valuable metal, or if it also reflected a practical understanding of predictable breakage patterns and ease of repair in the field. After all, a simpler construction might be easier for a village smith, or even yourself, to fix. So, this knife, this humble piece of sharpened metal and wood, is far more than just an object. It's your constant partner, a silent testament to your daily struggles and small victories. You wipe it clean, perhaps with a bit of grass or a rag, before sliding it back into its worn leather or wooden sheath, ready for the next task, which is never, ever far away. Its presence is a quiet comfort, a small piece of certainty in a world full of variables. And so, as you settle further into this quiet exploration, your thoughts, and perhaps your imaginary hands, drift towards the smaller, more intimate companions of daily life. These aren't the grand tools of construction or the defining implements of a trade, not always, but they are the quiet enablers, the little helpers you tuck into a pouch or a fold of your clothing, things easily overlooked, yet profoundly missed when absent. Consider, for a moment, the humble whetstone. You might pull out a small, flat piece of fine-grained stone, perhaps no larger than your palm, cool and smooth to the touch, yet with an almost imperceptible grittiness that whispers of its purpose. Its edges could be worn from countless sessions, softened by time and use. This isn't just a rock, it's a promise of sharpness. Remember that knife we admired earlier, so keen and ready. It doesn't stay that way by magic, unfortunately. A bit like some friendships. Really, they need a little regular maintenance to keep their edge. You'd find a comfortable spot, maybe by a slow-moving stream, the water gurgling a gentle accompaniment, a little moisture on the stone, or perhaps some animal fat if water is scarce. And then that distinctive, rhythmic shh, shh, shh sound begins. You draw the blade across the stone, carefully, maintaining the angle, feeling the almost imperceptible catch as the stone's abrasive surface kisses the metal, coaxing it back to keenness. It's a meditative process, isn't it? The world narrows to just your hands, the blade, the stone, and that whispery song of steel meeting mineral. You can almost smell the faint, metallic tang in the air, mixed with the damp earth or the scent of pine if you're out in the woods. Whetstones, or sharpening stones, have been crucial for millennia. The Romans, for instance, were quite particular about theirs, sourcing specific types of abrasive rock from places like Crete or the Ardennes to keep their tools and, of course, their famous gladi in prime condition. They knew a dull blade was mostly just an invitation for a bad day. Modern EDC enthusiasts, with their pocket dumps and meticulously curated gear, often include a compact sharpener, a direct descendant of these ancient stones, proving some needs are truly timeless. It's a quiet satisfaction, restoring an edge, knowing that this small effort makes a significant difference, whether you're preparing food, crafting a necessary item, or just feeling a bit more prepared for whatever the day or night might bring. From maintaining an edge, your attention, and perhaps your imaginary hand rummaging in that useful pouch we've envisioned, might alight upon an awl. It's a simple tool, yet so versatile. You might grasp a handle of polished wood, warmed by countless grips, or perhaps one of smooth, carved bone. It fits snugly in your palm, and extending from it is a slender, wickedly sharp point of hardened metal or fire-hardened wood, or even a sharpened piece of flint. Its purpose is elegant in its directness, to make holes. You press the point against a piece of leather, the kind we imagined for those sturdy shoes or a repair patch. There's that initial resistance, then a satisfying, subtle pa-po-pi-a, or a gentle tearing sound as the awl pierces through. You can feel the texture of the material giving way, the controlled force you're exerting. Think of the uses punching stitch holes for mending a cloak or a satchel, creating perforations to lace pieces of hide together for a container, or even, in a pinch, scribing a mark onto wood or soft stone. It's a tool for creation and repair, a tiny spearhead dedicated to constructive tasks. For delicate work, you'd use a finer point. For tougher materials, a more robust one. It's the ancestor of the modern sewing machine needle in a way, or the bread awl in a carpenter's kit. It's fascinating how such a basic implement unlocks so many possibilities. There's a quirky little tidbit here in some ancient cultures. For instance, certain groups in the Pacific Northwest, elaborately carved bone awls were not just utilitarian, they were also status symbols, sometimes adorned with intricate animal figures or geometric patterns, transforming a simple hole poker into a piece of personal art. Imagine explaining to your foraging partner that you need just match one more hour to perfect the tiny carved otter on your awl handle before you can help mend the berry basket. Priorities. Right? The precision an awl offers is quite something. It's not just brute force, but a careful, considered penetration, making way for thread, for lacing, for connection. And then, alongside these, you'd likely find a few simple pegs. These are the unsung heroes of temporary structures and quick fixes. You might have a small bundle of them, whittled from sturdy twigs, perhaps with a notch at one end. Or they could be more carefully crafted from bone, smoothed and pointed. You can almost feel the satisfying thud as you drive one into the earth with a convenient stone or the back of a hatchet, securing a flap of a simple lean-to against a sudden breeze. That little bit of wood or bone stands firm, holding fabric or hide taut, creating shelter, however modest. They're not just for tents, though. Imagine using a pair to pin a bundle of firewood together for easier carrying, or to secure a patch over a hole in a woven basket. They could act as toggles for clothing if you lost a button, a much more common occurrence than you'd think before the days of mass-produced everything. You might even use smaller, finer ones to pin drying herbs or strips of meat to a rack near the fire. The beauty of the peg is its simplicity and its disposability if made from wood. Lose one, and you can often whittle another in a few minutes, provided you have a decent knife kept sharp with that whetstone. Of course, it's a testament to human ingenuity, turning a common natural material into something so fundamentally useful. Modern camping stakes are their direct descendants, though often made of brightly colored aluminum, which, admittedly, is easier to find in the grass than a forgotten wooden peg. Historians still argue whether the sheer prevalence of small carved pegs in certain archaeological sites indicates widespread temporary shelter construction, or merely a common form of toggle or fastener for clothing and bags. Perhaps they were just really enthusiastic about their ancient equivalent of IKEA flat-pack furniture, and these were the leftover bits. Who knows? But these small items, the stone, the awl, the pegs, they speak of a quiet competence, a readiness to make, to mend, to adapt. They don't shout their importance, but their absence would be keenly felt, turning small inconveniences into significant problems. They are the field and home essentials, the pocket-sized problem solvers of their time. and indeed, of any time. Right then, you've managed to get through another day, perhaps even with a bit of that watery ale we were dreaming about earlier. But now, let's talk about something that glitters, or rather, something that often doesn't, at least not in your pocket actual money. Cold, hard coin. For you, a humble farmer tilling your precious, if somewhat stubborn, patch of earth, seeing a silver penny, let alone a gold noble, is probably about as common as seeing a unicorn help with the plowing. It's not that coins don't exist. Oh, they do. The merchants in the distant towns jingle them. The Lord certainly has chests full of them. And the king, well, let's just say he's not paying his taxes in turnips. You, however, live in a different kind of economy, one that runs on something far more tangible, far more immediate. Think of your daily life, the big stuff, like rent to the Lord, that might involve coin, or more likely, a hefty portion of your grain, the best of your livestock, or days of grudging labor. Those are the big, scary transactions. But what about the little things? What if your last needle snaps, a truly catastrophic event when you're trying to patch those perpetually disintegrating breaches? What if the salt pot is empty and food, already a bit bland, becomes utterly unpalatable? You're not going to break a rare silver coin, assuming you even have one stashed away in a grimy cloth under a loose floorboard, for a pinch of salt. That would be like using, a $50 bill to buy a single gumball today. Utter madness. So, you rely on the bits of barter. Your pockets, if you even have them sewn into your tunic, are more likely to hold a smooth, still warm egg from your scrawniest hen than any kind of minted currency. And that egg, my friend, is your debit card, your Venmo, your egg. It's a unit of value everyone understands. The alewife, if she's in a good mood, might give you a small cup for one. The peddler passing through, the one with the deliciously suspicious glint in his eye, might trade you a couple of much-needed iron nails for 2 or 3. It's a delicate dance of perceived worth. What else do you have in your arsenal of microtransactions? Remember that little herb patch your wife tends so carefully, the one next to the wattle fence? A small bundle of dried rosemary, or thyme, or even just some strong-smelling wild marjoram you foraged from the edge of the woods, can be surprisingly persuasive. These aren't just flavorings. They're medicine. They're preservatives. They're little bursts of something other than gruel. Someone whose own herb garden failed, or who doesn't have the knack, might gladly swap you a bit of yarn, or perhaps a worn but still usable leather strap. And then there's the produce. Beyond the major crops destined for the Lord or your own winter stores, a few surplus onions, their skins papery and rustling, a handful of misshapen apples from that one resilient tree, the kind that are more tart than sweet, but still a welcome treat. Maybe a small scoop of dried peas, carefully measured out. These aren't going to make you rich, obviously. We're talking about the pocket change of the medieval world. It's all very organic, isn't it? And free range, and probably crawling with things you'd rather not think about. But hey, protein is protein. That was a joke. Mostly. It's fascinating. Really, this constant, almost invisible flow of goods and services. A mainstream historical fact for you: the vast majority of local transactions in rural medieval Europe happened without any coin changing hands. Barter and systems of reciprocal obligation were absolutely the norm. Your neighbor helps you mend a fence today. You'll help him bring in his hay tomorrow. No coins, just an understanding. It's a community-based, an economic system built on trust and, let's be honest, the fact that everyone is pretty much in the same muddy, manure-scented boat. think about services too. Can you whittle a halfway decent wooden peg? Or perhaps you're surprisingly good at sharpening a dull blade on a whetstone. Maybe your wife can offer to help with a birth, or watch a neighbor's child for an afternoon. These small acts of skill or kindness are also part of this intricate web of exchange. It's not always a direct one-for-one swap either. Sometimes it's about building up a sort of social credit. You help someone out, and they owe you one. This IOU might be cashed in weeks or even months later for something entirely different. It's like a really, really slow burn loyalty program where the rewards are survival and slightly less misery. Now, for a quirky little tidbit while you're trading eggs for ale, sometimes even significant payments, like rent, could be made in specific, valuable commodities. There are records of peppercorn rents, where a tenant might owe their lord a pound of peppercorns each year, in an age where spices were incredibly valuable. Coming all the way from the east, a peppercorn was a tiny, potent parcel of wealth. So, while you're unlikely to be trading in pepper, it shows how deeply ingrained the idea of commodity-based value was, far beyond simple eggs or onions. It's a good reminder that money can take many forms. The coins that do circulate are often worn smooth, their markings barely legible. They've passed through so many hands, seen so many desperate exchanges. You might get one for selling a pig at a larger market, or as a rare payment for specialized labor, and then you hoard it. Because the tax man, he doesn't want your second best chicken. He wants coin. The church, for certain tithes or indulgences, might also prefer the jingle of metal. So, any actual currency you acquire is often earmarked for these unavoidable external demands, leaving the day-to-day running on this far more flexible, if less shiny system. You become incredibly adept at judging value. Is this slightly bruised apple worth as much as that perfectly formed one? How many of your wife's spun threads equal a small measure of salt? It's a constant negotiation, a silent assessment. There's no price tag, no fixed exchange rate. It's all wonderfully, terrifyingly fluid. And of course, there's the ever-present scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the transition from a gift economy, where things were given with an expectation of general reciprocity, to a more calculated commercial barter system was a gradual evolution, or if elements of both coexisted for centuries, shifting depending on the social context and a community's specific needs. For you, living it, it's probably a bit of both. You give a neighbor a share of your bread when their oven collapses, not expecting an immediate item in return, but knowing the gesture strengthens the bonds that help you all survive. Then, you haggle fiercely with that traveling tinker over the price of a new pot, because he's an outsider, and it's just business. So, you see, your world, while lacking the convenience of a contactless payment, unless you count politely handing over a turnip, as contactless has its own complex financial rhythms. It's a system built on what you have, what you can make, and who you know. It's deeply personal. Face to face, no anonymous transactions here. Every exchange is a story, a connection. However fleeting, it's not about getting rich. It's about getting by, one egg, one handful of herbs, one mended shoe at a time. And as you drift off to sleep, maybe you're not counting sheep, but counting the eggs you hope your hens will lay tomorrow. Each one a tiny potential solution to a tiny future problem. You're now stepping away from that central hearth, aren't you? The warmth, the promise of a more substantial meal later, fades a little with each step, but life, as we know, often calls you further afield than your own doorstep. Whether it's a long day tending to those distant fields we imagined earlier, or perhaps a journey to a neighboring village, or even just the daily grind of an apprenticeship that keeps you from returning home midday. You can't exactly tap an app on a smooth, glowing rectangle for a drone to deliver a hot lunch. No, you need something pocket-sized, something for the road, a morsel for the day. You reach into a pouch, perhaps a simple linen bag tucked into your belt, or a deeper pocket in that tunic we talked about. Your fingers brush against something familiar, something that offers a quiet promise of energy when you most need it. Let's see what you've packed. Shall we? First, there's likely a piece of bread, not the soft, fluffy stuff you might picture from a modern artisan bakery. Oh no, this is more robust. Think of a very, very dense rye bread, or a flatbread that's been baked until it's almost a cracker. Something akin to a ship's biscuit before ships were quite so grand. Its primary virtue isn't its delightful airiness, but its longevity. This bread, often called hardtack in later military contexts, though the principle is ancient, is designed not to spoil quickly. It might be a bit chewy. All right, incredibly chewy. You gnaw on a corner, the slightly sour, earthy taste filling your mouth. It's not gourmet, but it's calories, and it's surprisingly filling. Sometimes, if you're lucky, it might have a few seeds baked into it. Flax, perhaps, or poppy, adding a tiny bit of texture and flavor. You might even dip it into a stream if you pass one, to soften it up a little, though that's a luxury. Remember that water skin we filled? A sip from that might help it go down too. It's the kind of bread that, if you dropped it, you'd be more worried about your toe than the bread. Solid, dependable, a bit like a very boring, but ultimately reliable friend you only call when you need help moving. Then, your fingers find something sweeter. Dried fruit. This is where things get a little more exciting, comparatively speaking. Perhaps you have a handful of dried figs, their skins slightly leathery, the inside still wonderfully sticky and packed with tiny, crunchy seeds. Or maybe it's dried apples, sliced thin and air-dried until they're like chewy, tart little chips. Raisins, of course, are a classic, nature's candy, as they say. Though probably not marketed with such a cheerful slogan back then. More like shriveled grapes, surprisingly edible. These fruits are a fantastic source of quick energy, a burst of sweetness that can lift your spirits on a long, monotonous afternoon. The drying process, one of humanity's oldest food preservation techniques, concentrates their sugars and makes them wonderfully portable. No messy juice, no bruising, just pure, unadulterated fruit power. You pop a fig into your mouth, savoring the intense sweetness. It's a small moment of pleasure in a day that might otherwise be quite demanding. And what's this? Nuts. A true treasure trove of protein and fat. Perfect for sustained energy. Maybe a small handful of walnuts, their shells cracked beforehand with a convenient rock, or perhaps some hazelnuts, small and round, gathered from the woods. If you're in a region where they grow, almonds might make an appearance, though they were often a more prized commodity. These are the ancient equivalent of an energy bar. Really, they don't take up much space, they don't spoil easily, and they pack a serious nutritional punch. You crunch down on a walnut, its slightly bitter, oily richness, a welcome contrast to the sweetness of the fruit and the plainness of the bread. It's amazing how these simple items, things we still enjoy today, formed the backbone of portable nutrition for centuries. Historians often point to the Roman legionaries' diet as a prime example of efficient field rations, which included hard biscuits known as panis militaris, marmot, alongside bacon, cheese, and wine, or pasca. A vinegary drink made from water and sour wine or vinegar. This wasn't just about sustenance, but also about morale and the incredible ability to march vast distances and build all those famously straight roads. Your little pouch might not be quite as varied or state-sponsored, but the core principle is the same fuel for the journey. Now, it's not always just these three staples, depending on your region, the season, and your own foresight. You might have a small piece of dried meat, a kind of jerky, tough and salty, but incredibly long-lasting. Or perhaps a small chunk of hard cheese, something that can withstand a bit of jostling and warmth without turning into a fragrant, gooey puddle. Imagine trying to keep a delicate brie happy in your pocket on a warm summer's day while you're out toiling. Not ideal? This cheese would be more like a very determined Parmesan, something you almost have to chisel bits off. Here's a quirky little tidbit for you sometimes. People would carry roasted grains, like barley or wheat. They'd parch them, essentially toasting them until dry and slightly nutty. You could chew on these directly, like a very rustic snack, or, if you had the means and a moment, grind them roughly between two stones and mix them with a little water to make a rudimentary porridge or gruel on the go. Not exactly a five-star meal, but it's versatile. It's like the original instant oatmeal, just significantly less instant, and probably without the delightful maple and brown sugar or apple cinnamon flavor options. The exact composition of your bucket lunch is, of course, something historians still argue, whether it was primarily determined by personal wealth, regional availability of foodstuffs, or simply individual preference and what was left over from the previous evening's meal. Could the poorest laborer only afford the plainest bread, perhaps with a wild-foraged berry or two, while someone with a bit more means might have a more diverse selection of preserved fruits and nuts? It seems incredibly likely. The contents of your pouch say a lot about your day-to-day life and your access to resources, a tiny edible snapshot of your social standing. You might also carry a few precious grains of salt, wrapped carefully in a leaf or a tiny piece of cloth. Salt, remember from our discussions of trade and preservation, was incredibly valuable, not just for flavor, but for essential bodily functions and for preserving other foods. A tiny pinch on your bread or with your dried meat could make a world of difference to the palatability and your well-being. Think about modern trail mix. It's not so far removed. Is it nuts? Dried fruit? Maybe some seeds? We've just added chocolate chips, yogurt-covered somethings, and a fancy marketing budget. The fundamental human need for portable, energy-dense food hasn't changed all that much. We still reach for these things when we're on the move, when we're away from our kitchens, our hearths. As you munch on your provisions, you're not sitting down at a table with fine linens. You're likely leaning against a tree, or perched on a rock by the side of a track, or perhaps even eating as you walk, if time is pressing. This isn't a leisurely meal. It's a functional one. It's about refueling the body so you can continue with whatever task is at hand. There's a certain efficiency to it, a stark simplicity, no fuss, no elaborate preparation at the point of consumption. Just unwrap or reach in and eat. And it's quiet, isn't it? Just the sound of your own chewing, the rustle of leaves if you're outdoors, the distant sounds of whatever work or travel you're engaged in. It's a moment of simple self-care, a small acknowledgement that your body needs fuel. You finish your morsel, perhaps wiping your hands on your tunic, napkins being a bit of a future luxury in this context. Unless you count a particularly smooth leaf. You take another sip of water, that little bit of food, that humble collection of bread, fruit, and nuts makes a surprising difference. Your energy levels feel a little restored. The slight hunger pang that was starting to make the world seem a bit grayer has subsided. You're ready to face the next few hours. It's a testament to human ingenuity. Really, finding ways to carry sustenance, to extend our range beyond the immediate vicinity of the cooking fire. It's what allowed for longer workdays in the fields, for trade between distant settlements, for journeys of exploration and necessity. All thanks to these humble, unassuming pocketfuls of food. You wouldn't want to live on it exclusively. Perhaps the thought of endless hard bread might make your jaw ache just imagining it. But for a morsel for the day, it does the job, and it does it well. It's the ancient equivalent of grabbing a quick snack to keep you going. A tradition that, in its essence, continues right up to your own hurried lunch break or your next weekend hike. Merc. And after a long day, or perhaps just a particularly dusty few hours trying to, not become part of the local food chain, you find a moment for yourself. It's not exactly a spa day. Let's be clear. Your high-tech 27-blade razor and artisanal beard oil are, shall we say, several millennia away. But even now, even here, there's a quiet dignity in simple upkeep, a small rebellion against the encroaching wildness. You reach into that little pouch we talked about, the one holding your most essential, personal bits and pieces. Your fingers brush against something small, relatively smooth, yet with a distinct texture. It's a comb, not the brightly colored plastic kind. Oh no. This one is likely carved from bone, perhaps a rib from a smaller animal, or a piece of antler shed seasoned before last. You can feel the slight imperfections where the maker's tool, probably a sharp flint flake, slipped a little. The teeth, a bit uneven, are surprisingly effective. Or maybe it's a wooden one, whittled from a piece of yew or boxwood, the grain still faintly visible, worn smooth by repeated use, and the oils from your hair. It has a faint, earthy scent, almost imperceptible unless you hold it close. You draw it through your hair. It catches. Of course, it catches. You're not exactly using leave-in conditioner out here. There's a satisfying, if slightly uncomfortable, tug as it works through tangles matted with dust, sweat, and perhaps a stray bit of leaf from when you were, let's say, enthusiastically examining the forest floor for edible roots. Remember that intense focus. It shows in your hairstyle. Each pass of the comb is a tiny victory against chaos. It's not just about aesthetics, though a less matted head of hair probably feels a good deal better. It's also about health. Those little unwelcome guests, lice, and other tiny hitchhikers, find a well-combed head a less inviting home. It's a known fact that some of the earliest combs, like those found in ancient Egyptian tombs dating back over 5,000 years, were not just decorative, but also highly practical for delousing. So, you're basically channeling your inner pharaoh, minus the gold and the legions of servants. Small comforts. The bone comb feels cool against your scalp, a stark contrast to the warmth of your skin. If it's wooden, it might have a slightly softer, a warmer touch. You work methodically, section by section. It's a slow process, unhurried. There's no rush, no next appointment to get to, unless you count an appointment with trying to find dinner before it gets dark. You might even pause, examining the comb, picking out the debris it has collected, a tiny testament to your day's activities. Historians still argue whether the intricate decorations found on some ancient combs, particularly from Viking hordes, were purely for status and artistic expression, or if they also held deeper, perhaps even magical significance in grooming rituals. Yours is probably less about Viking chic and more about, well, not looking like you've been dragged through a hedge backward. Though, to be fair, you might have been. Then there's the cloth. It's nothing fancy. Perhaps a small softened piece of linen, if you're lucky, or a scrap of decently tanned animal hide, thinned and worked until it's somewhat pliable. It's not your luxurious, fluffy towel, that's for sure. It's probably the size of a modern handkerchief, maybe a little larger. You dip a corner into your water skin, that precious water we discussed earlier. Every drop counted, just enough to dampen it. The coolness is a welcome relief as you wipe it across your forehead, your neck, your arms. It comes away visibly darker. The grime of the day, sweat, dust, a smear of mud from that stream crossing, maybe a bit of ash from the fire pit. It's a simple action. This wiping, but profoundly grounding. You can feel the pores of your skin breathe a little easier. It's not a deep clean, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something. It's a way to shed a layer of the day's toil, to feel a fraction more human, a tiny bit more presentable to yourself. If no one else, this humble piece of cloth is the ancestor of our face cloths, our napkins, even those little wet wipes we can't live without on a road trip. Though this one, you'll be rinsing and reusing until it practically disintegrates. Talk about sustainable. Sometimes, these cloths were made from quite surprising materials. While linen and wool were common where available, some cultures got quite inventive. It's a quirky little tidbit that in some regions, finely beaten tree bark, like tapa cloth, could be processed to a softness suitable for such personal uses, though it wouldn't be nearly as durable as woven fabric or leather. Imagine trying to explain that in the laundry aisle. Yes, I'm looking for the extra soft birch bark blend. The cloth might also be used to dry your hands after a rinse, or even to wipe down your few precious tools, keeping them free of rust or sticky residues. It's multi-purpose, this unassuming square. It's probably a bit stiff, smells faintly of wood smoke, damp earth, and you? But it's your cloth. You know its every frayed edge, every thin spot. It's a companion of sorts, absorbing the evidence of your efforts. So, there you are. Hair slightly less like a bird's nest, face a little cleaner. You're not going to win any beauty pageants, and your personal hygiene routine would probably make a modern-day influencer faint. But in the quiet of this moment, with these simple aids, a bone comb, a piece of cloth, you've reclaimed a small piece of yourself. It's a ritual, almost meditative. The gentle scraping of the comb, the cool dampness of the cloth. These are the small, often overlooked anchors to a sense of order in a world that, let's face it, is mostly trying to get you dirty again as quickly as possible. And really, isn't that what grooming is all about? A temporary, often futile, but deeply satisfying battle against entropy. At least your ancestors wouldn't be finding microplastics in your archaeological layer from this particular routine. Silver linings. A, you tuck the comb and the slightly damp cloth back into their place, ready for their next call to duty. Nulls nemma waltz. And so, as you're out and about with that trusty satchel we talked about bumping gently against your hip, or perhaps wrapped in that heavy wool cloak, you know, the one that smells faintly of wood smoke and damp earth, things inevitably start to, well, come apart. A seam might sigh open, a strap might fray. The world just loves a bit of entropy, doesn't it? It's not like you can just pop down to the old Primark for a new tunic if yours gets snagged on a branch. This is where your foresight, your quiet preparedness, truly shines. And it often comes down to the humble, yet utterly essential, trio string, thread, and needle. You probably have a small, precious bundle of these tucked away somewhere safe and dry. Let's start with the most basic string. This isn't your fancy, perfectly spooled craft store string. Oh no, this is utilitarian stuff. It might be a hank of rough, somewhat hairy cordage made from plant fibers like flax or hemp, feeling a bit like a very thin, very stiff cat's tongue against your palm. Or perhaps you've got some lengths of sinew, carefully dried and separated into tough, wiry strands. You use this for the quick and dirty fixes, that wooden toggle that's come loose from your cloak. A few wraps of sinew pulled tight will hold it for now. A bundle of kindling needs to be secured. String, a tool handle. Remember that axe we looked at with its smooth wooden grip, starting to show a tiny crack. A tight binding of plant fiber string, maybe even rubbed with a bit of beeswax from your kit to help it grip and resist moisture, can prevent a small problem from becoming a big one. It's the ancient equivalent of that roll of mystery brand duct tape everyone seems to have lurking in a drawer. The one that's seen better days, but still gets called upon for heroic, if not always pretty, repairs. Then you have thread. This is string's more refined, more elegant cousin. It's finer, usually smoother, and intended for more delicate, more permanent work. You might have a few different types, wound carefully around a flat piece of wood or bone, or perhaps even a small, hollow reed. There could be sturdy linen thread, surprisingly strong for its fineness, a pale creamy color. You'd feel its slight texture, the way it almost wants to cling to itself. Maybe some woolen thread, dyed with whatever local plants offered their colors. A muted green, a soft brown. This would be softer, with a bit more give, if you were exceptionally fortunate, or perhaps had traded well. You might even possess a tiny, precious wisp of silk thread, impossibly fine and smooth, a whisper against your fingertips, reserved for the most special repairs or delicate fabrics. You use this thread for mending that tear in your sleeve, painstakingly drawing the edges together with small, even stitches. You use it to reattach a button, if buttons are a thing in your particular time and place in the way we know them, or perhaps to repair a rip in a valuable sack that holds your grain, because spilled grain is a tragedy written in hunger. Every stitch is an act of thrift, a tiny defiance against wear and waste, making sure your few possessions last as long as humanly possible. But string and thread, for all their usefulness, are just limp fibers without their crucial partner, the needle. Ah, the needle. Such a small thing, yet so transformative. You might have one, or if you're lucky, a few of varying sizes, perhaps a sturdy one of bronze, cool and solid in your fingers, with a surprisingly large eye that still feels like a cosmic challenge to thread when the light is fading. Or maybe an even finer one made of iron, carefully kept from rust by being stored in a little oily rag or stuck into a piece of wool. Bone needles, of course, have been around for an astonishingly long time. In fact, eyed needles, crafted from bone or ivory, date back at least 40,000 years, to the Upper Paleolithic period. Think about that. This tiny invention revolutionized humanity's ability to create fitted clothing, to protect themselves from the elements in a way never before possible. It's a direct line from then to you, fumbling to thread your own needle. Threading these things, even with good light, can sometimes feel like trying to convince a cat to take a bath. A lot of squinting and muttered encouragement. Once threaded, though, that needle becomes an extension of your will, guiding the thread through fabric with a series of tiny, satisfying thwips, or pops, as it pierces through. You'd keep your needles incredibly safe, perhaps in a small, carved wooden case, or even a hollowed-out bird bone, stoppered with a bit of beeswax. Losing a needle in your bedding, well, that's a surprise you only want to find once, preferably not with your foot. These simple tools are your first line of defense for immediate, on-the-spot repairs. Consider your clothing, a snagged tunic, a ripped trouser leg. These aren't just cosmetic issues. In a harsher world, a tear can mean exposure, cold, and even illness. A quick stop, a few minutes with needle and thread, and you're patched up, ready to continue. It's the ultimate expression of a stitch in time saves 9. Then there are your tools. We mentioned wrapping a cracked handle, but you might also use strong thread or sinew to resecure a loose arrowhead to its shaft, or to bind a split in a wooden bowl just enough to keep it functional. And harness. If you rely on a horse, an ox, or even a dog for pulling a cart or a plow. The integrity of your harness is paramount. A broken strap could mean a runaway animal, a smashed cart, or a field left unplowed. Here, you might use your sturdiest thread, or even thin strips of leather thong if you have them, perhaps with an awl to pre-punch holes in tougher leather, then stitching it all back together with a robust needle. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of awls in some early toolkits indicates that much sewing was actually lacing through pre-punched holes, or if fine needles simply didn't preserve as well in the archaeological record for certain periods. It's all about practicality and thrift. There's a quiet dignity in making do, in extending the life of your possessions through your own skill. Each repaired item carries the story of its near demise and its careful salvation. You might even have a small, rather curious-looking tool, perhaps a lucette, often shaped like a little two-pronged lyre from wood or bone. Did you know people used these to braid incredibly strong square cords? It's a wonderfully simple, almost meditative process of looping thread or fine string, creating a cord far more complex and durable than simply twisting fibers. That cord could then be used for more robust lacing, for drawstrings, or even as a stronger type of repair string itself. It's another layer of self-sufficiency, turning basic fibers into something even more useful. Every time you pull that thread tight, every knot you tie, you're pushing back against the slow decay of things, ensuring that what little you have serves you well, for as long as it possibly can. It's a fundamental human skill, this art of mending, born from necessity, but carrying a quiet satisfaction all its own. So, after all those grand displays we talked about, those communal efforts to keep the shadows at bay, you find yourself needing something a bit more personal, something you can tuck away, a silent guardian in your pocket or around your neck. And that's where we arrive, at the wonderfully human world of charms, amulets, and protection. You feel that familiar prickle of unease, that sense that perhaps the universe isn't entirely on your side today? It's an age-old feeling, isn't it? So, you reach for that small comfort, that tangible piece of hope. It's not about grand gestures now. It's about the intimate, the whispered promise of safety. These items, they're not just random trinkets. Oh no, each one is imbued, saturated with belief, with intention. Whether it's for a whisper of good luck as you, say, try to haggle for a slightly less rotten piece of bread at the market, or for a more robust spiritual shield against things that go bump in the night. And, let's be honest, things that go bump in the day too. Misfortune, after all, isn't known for its punctuality. Think about the sheer variety. You might have a small, worn religious token. Perhaps it's a crudely carved wooden cross, its edges softened by countless anxious thumbs rubbing over its surface. The grain of the wood, a familiar comfort under your touch. Or maybe it's a little metal disc, perhaps pewter or even silver if you're fortunate, stamped with the image of a saint, a guardian angel, or a deity you pray to when the road gets particularly dark, or the shadows in the forest seem a little too deep. These weren't just passive declarations of faith. They were active lines of defense, miniature spiritual shields. Holding one, you feel the cool metal or the familiar texture of wood against your palm, a tiny anchor in a sea of uncertainty. It's like having a direct line to the divine, or at least, that's the hope. Isn't it? Better than relying on your own questionable decision-making skills, that's for sure. Then you have the botanical brigade, the dried herbs, tucked into little pouches of leather or cloth, carefully stitched and perhaps tied with a special knot, or sometimes even sewn discreetly into the lining of your clothes, right near your heart or in a hidden seam. Imagine the faint, earthy, or sometimes sharply clean scent that might waft up when you move. a subtle, personal aroma of protection. Rosemary, as we've touched upon, for remembrance and clarity, perhaps also believed to strengthen the heart and ward off pestilence if you wore it over your chest. Its piney fragrance a constant companion. Sage, not just for cleansing spaces like we mentioned earlier with those smudging rituals, but carried for wisdom and personal purification. Its slightly camphorous aroma a constant, subtle reminder of clarity. Lavender, maybe Eames for its renowned calming properties, thought to soothe troubled minds and invite peaceful sleep. Its gentle, sweet perfume believed to ward off troublesome spirits or even actual pests. Perhaps a sprig of rue, pungent and a little bitter, known as the herb of grace, and widely considered a powerful defense against witches and the evil eye. Its strong scent a barrier against unseen ills. You'd carefully select these herbs, perhaps guided by local lore or a wise elder. Dry them in a cool, dark place away from the harsh sun, and maybe whisper your hopes and intentions into them as you bundled them up. It's a bit like carrying a tiny, fragrant first aid kit for the soul, a portable garden of protective essences. Though, one hopes it's more effective than carrying around that week-old sandwich you forgot about in your bag. The olfactory defenses of that are probably quite potent in their own right, just not in a helpful way. The ancient Romans, for instance, were big fans of protective amulets. One widespread mainstream historical fact is the common use of phallic charms called fascinum, which were believed to ward off the evil eye and bring good fortune. You'd see them everywhere, on necklaces, hanging from bracelets, incorporated into household decorations, even on children. A bit surprising for our modern sensibilities, perhaps, but for them, it was all about potent, generative, life-affirming energy actively pushing back against negativity and ill will. And it's not just about broad-spectrum spiritual SPF. Sometimes, you need a targeted boost for good luck, especially if you feel fate has been a bit stingy lately. Maybe it's a uniquely shaped stone you found by a river, its coolness a promise of stability, its smoothness worn by water and time, or a coin with a particular mark, perhaps bent or holed, saved from a moment of unexpected good fortune, hoping it'll act as a magnet and bring more of the same. The idea that an object can be a conduit or a container for good vibes, for luck, is deeply ingrained across cultures. People carried these things with a kind of quiet desperation and hope, a tangible plea to the fickle fates. Warding off misfortune was a major preoccupation, as you can well imagine in a world filled with uncertainties. The concept of the evil eye, that malevolent glare from an envious or malicious person that could bring sickness, loss, or general ruin, was, and in many cultures still is, incredibly potent. So, you'd carry something to deflect it, to turn that harmful energy away. Blue beads, often with an eye-like pattern painted or embedded within them, are a classic example. Found across millennia and vast geographical regions, from the Mediterranean to the Middle East, or perhaps a piece of iron, that strong, unyielding metal, believed to repel troublesome fae, ghosts, or malevolent spirits. Remember how we discussed iron's significance in other contexts? Like in tools and weapons, it's a recurring theme. Its very terrestrial, unyielding nature, seen as a shield against the ethereal and harmful. A quirky little tidbit. For you, in some medieval European traditions, it was believed that carrying a weasel's dried right testicle could protect against witchcraft and grant invincibility in some accounts. I'll just let you ponder the logistics and the sheer dedication, not to mention the bravery, involved in acquiring such an item. Definitely puts your lucky rabbit's foot into perspective, doesn't it? Though, hopefully, the weasel was already, peacefully retired from its testicular duties. Small comfort to the weasel. I suppose. These amulets and charms weren't just passive objects simply lying in your pocket. They often required interaction, a kind of ongoing relationship. You touch them, especially in moments of fear or need. Perhaps say a quiet prayer or incantation over them, reaffirming their power and your connection to it. They were companions, in a way, silent, steadfast. Sometimes, the materials themselves were thought to hold inherent power. Amber, warm to the touch and connected to the sun, for protection and healing. Jet, deep black and polished, for absorbing negativity. Or carnelian, a rich reddish-orange stone, for courage and vitality. Historians still argue whether the perceived efficacy of these charms stemmed from genuine supernatural power, or if their primary function was psychological, offering comfort and a sense of control that, in turn, bolstered an individual's resilience, optimism, and even their immune system. It's a fascinating debate, isn't it? Does it truly matter why it works, as long as it helps you face another daunting medieval Monday, or whatever equivalent trial you're enduring? The comfort itself is a kind of power. You can see the echoes today, can't you? That lucky penny you keep in your wallet, the Christopher medal hanging from a car's rearview mirror, the crystals some people carry for their specific energies, or even that slightly ratty concert t-shirt you wear for important exams. We still reach for these small reassurances, these tangible bits of hope. That little smooth stone you picked up on a beach vacation that now lives in your coat pocket, and you find your fingers seeking it out before a big meeting or a difficult conversation. It's the same impulse, that same enduring human need to feel a little less alone, a little more protected in a world that often feels vast, unpredictable, and indifferent. These items whisper stories of fear, yes, but more importantly, they whisper stories of hope, of resilience, of the enduring human spirit trying to find a little bit of magic, a little bit of an edge, in an often challenging world. They are a testament to our innate ability to imbue the ordinary with the extraordinary, to find comfort and strength in the small, the portable, the deeply personal. And as you clutch your own chosen talisman, whatever it may be, whether it's an ancient artifact or a modern memento, you're part of a very, very long tradition. Just try not to lose it, especially if it involved a particularly uncooperative weasel. You wouldn't want all that effort to go to waste. And so, with that in mind, you shift your focus. Perhaps from those larger, more general purpose tools we were just examining, to something a little more specialized, a little closer to the warmth of a living, breathing creature. Your hand, almost unconsciously, might drift to a small pouch or a specific fold in your gear, seeking out those bits and bobs that speak of care, of responsibility, of a life intertwined with other lives. These aren't the grand tools of building or defense, but the quiet, essential items for tending to your four-legged, or perhaps even two-legged and feathered companions. You pull out a piece of leather, not a large hide, but a manageable scrap, perhaps the size of your palm, or a little larger. It's been treated, of course, softened with fats or brains, scraped and worked until it's supple, yet incredibly tough. You run a thumb across its surface. It might be smooth on one side, slightly rougher, more suede-like on the other. It smells faintly of wood smoke and whatever tanning agents were used, maybe oak bark, giving it a rich, earthy aroma. This isn't for show. This is your ancient equivalent of a super robust repair kit. Imagine a strap on a pack animal's harness starting to fray, or a tear in a water skin. Remember that one we talked about, the one that absolutely cannot leak if you want to see another sunrise. This piece of leather, along with a sturdy bone awl and some sinew thread you'd also keep handy, is your first line of defense? Because duct tape hasn't been invented yet, And even if it had, good luck getting it to stick to a grumpy, possibly damp, goat. This small square of cured hide can patch, reinforce, or even create a new loop or tie when something critical gives way. It's the difference between a minor inconvenience and a potentially disastrous setback when you're relying on your animals for transport, for food, or for their valuable products. Speaking of valuable products, you then carefully unwrap another item, perhaps from an oiled cloth to protect its edge. It's a set of shears, though they might not look quite like the garden shears you're picturing. Think simpler, more like two flat blades, probably iron if you're a bit more advanced, or even bronze, connected at the handle end by a U-shaped springy bow. To use them, you squeeze the blades together. Snick, snick, snick. And the spring action parts them again. It's a continuous, rhythmic motion. You can almost feel the slight resistance as they slide through a thick, greasy fleece, the lanolin coating the blades, making your own hands feel strangely soft afterwards. The wool. Oh, the wool. It's easy to forget just how revolutionary the domestication of sheep for wool was. It's a mainstream historical fact, but profound it transformed textile production, clothing, and even trade across ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to the Roman Empire. No more just relying on plant fibers or scraped hides. Now you have this renewable resource that can be spun, woven, and dyed into fabrics of incredible warmth and versatility. These shears, then, are a key to unlocking that wealth. They aren't your fancy electric salon shears. Mind you, using these probably counts as your arm workout for the week or month, especially if you have a whole flock to get through. And you have to be careful, so careful, not to nick the animal, feeling for the contours of its body beneath that dense coat. Historians still argue whether the earliest forms of animal marking, which often happened around shearing time, were purely for ownership or also held ritualistic significance, perhaps to ensure the flock's prosperity. You might also find a small, curved piece of wood, almost like a miniature shepherd's crook, but much lighter, more delicate. This isn't for leaning on or fending off wolves, like the larger staff we might have discussed. This is for gently hooking a sheep's leg to guide it, or for carefully maneuvering a newborn calf or lamb without too much direct handling, especially if the mother is a bit skittish. Or perhaps you have a soft, plaited rope, maybe made from plant fibers or even horsehair. Strong but not abrasive, not for yanking, but for a gentle tether, for leading an animal to fresh pasture or water, or securing it safely at night. It's all about gentle persuasion, or at least convincing the animal. It was its idea to go into the pen. The original animal psychologists. These folks were tucked away somewhere safe, perhaps in a little wooden or clay pot. You'd have a salve or unguent. This could be a mixture of rendered animal fat, maybe lanolin itself, recycled from the shearing, and various herbs. You might recognize the scent of yarrow, good for staunching blood, or plantain, known for its soothing properties on scrapes and insect bites. If an animal gets a cut, a sore, or is bothered by flies, a dab of this concoction can provide relief and help prevent infection. It's a small thing, this pot of goo, but it represents a deep understanding of local botany and a commitment to the animal's well-being. Think of it as your all-natural, multi-purpose, veterinary first aid cream. And what about a simple grooming tool? Perhaps a flat piece of wood with carved teeth, or even a section of a dried teasel head. Its natural barbs perfect for combing through fur or fleece. This isn't just about making your animals look pretty for the village fair. Though pride in one's livestock is an ancient sentiment, grooming helps remove dirt, burrs, and, crucially, external parasites like ticks and lice, which can weaken an animal and spread disease. A quirky little tidbit for you, some ancient herders. particularly in more isolated communities, developed incredibly intricate grooming rituals, sometimes believing that the patterns they combed into an animal's coat could ward off bad luck or even attract benevolent spirits to protect their herds. You can just imagine someone meticulously creating chevron patterns on their prize-winning goat, hoping it means an extra kid next spring. You might also carry a small, very smooth stone, perhaps warmed by your body heat or by a low fire. While its uses could be varied, in the context of animal husbandry, such stones were sometimes employed, very gently, to help massage a ewe or nanny goat struggling with a difficult birth, encouraging the passage of the young. It's a practice rooted in observation and a desire to assist, a quiet intervention in a moment of vulnerability. These small items, these humble tools and preparations, they don't shout their importance. They whisper it in the soft snick of shears, the slight pull of a leather thong being tightened, the soothing scent of a herbal salve. They speak of a daily rhythm, a close, often demanding, but ultimately symbiotic relationship with the animals that share your world. A world where their health and your survival are often one and the same. Each item, carried with care, is a testament to that vital connection, a quiet acknowledgement of the responsibility you hold. Momono, and as you continue your quiet exploration, your attention shifts from the wider landscape to the small treasures held within it, the little mementos the earth offers up if you're patient enough to look. You reach into a pocket, or perhaps that little pouch you've been carrying. Remember that one? The one you weren't sure you'd need, and you pull out a few items collected from the field, things that whispered stories as you passed. First, there are the seeds. You carefully pour a small handful into your palm. They're tiny, most of them, little beads of potential, each one a promise of future life, of continuity. Some are smooth and almost glossy, like polished jet, slipping between your fingers with a soft, dry rustle. Others are rougher, still clinging to bits of dried husk or feathery pappus, designed for flight, for dispersal on the wind we felt earlier. You saved these, perhaps from a particularly vibrant wildflower, or maybe from a robust-looking food plant you encountered, something that thrived even in that slightly challenging patch of ground near the old boundary wall. This act of saving seeds, it's one of the oldest human traditions, isn't it? It's the very foundation of settled life. The people of the Fertile Crescent, thousands of years ago, were among the first to systematically domesticate plants, meticulously selecting and saving seeds from the hardiest wheat and barley, transforming humanity's relationship with the planet. It's a direct line from their careful hands to yours, holding these tiny emblems of next year's hopes. You might be saving these heirloom varieties, seeds passed down through generations, each one carrying a genetic story, unlike the hybrid seeds so common in modern, large-scale agriculture, which often don't breed true if you save them. There's a certain satisfaction, a quiet rebellion almost, in participating in this age-old cycle of selecting, saving, and sowing. You carefully place them in a small breathable pouch, hoping you remember which ones are for the surprisingly sweet wild berries and which are for that fiery little pepper you found. Future you will either thank you or mildly regret your adventurous palate. It's quite something, isn't it? To think that entire civilizations rested on this simple act. Speaking of ancient seeds, there's a rather lovely story about the Judean date palm seed, nicknamed Methuselah, which was successfully germinated after being preserved for nearly 2,000 years, found in an archaeological dig at Masada. Imagine a tiny seed holding life for 2 millennia, a quiet testament to endurance. Of course, this whole agricultural revolution, the shift to farming and saving seeds, isn't without its complexities. Historians still argue whether the transition to agriculture was a net positive for overall human health and leisure time. with some suggesting that hunter-gatherer lifestyles might have been, in some ways, less arduous. An interesting thought to ponder as you tuck your own saved seeds away. Next, your fingers close around something cool and solid. You pull out an interesting stone. It's not a gemstone, not something that would fetch a fortune, but it caught your eye. Perhaps it's wonderfully smooth, a river stone worn down by centuries of flowing water and tumbling against its brethren, feeling almost like silk against your skin. Or maybe it's a fragment of quartz, with tiny, glittering crystals catching the light. A miniature galaxy in your hand. You turn it over, feeling its weight, its unique texture. Is it surprisingly light for its size, hinting at a porous volcanic origin? Or is it dense, a piece of ancient granite, speckled with feldspar and mica, remnants of mountains long eroded? This one you found. Let's say it's a piece of chert or flint. Its edges are still quite sharp, a reminder of how our ancestors, with remarkable ingenuity, would have prized such a find. This wasn't just a rock to them. It was a potential knife, a scraper, an arrowhead. Remember those pictographs we imagined earlier, depicting hunting scenes? The tools used would have started life just like this: a stone found, assessed, and then skillfully napped into shape. You run your thumb over its surface. You picked it up from that little gully where the stream had cut down through the layers of earth, exposing older deposits. It doesn't sing with the promise of gold, nor does it whisper of forgotten kings. It's just a stone, a silent witness to geological time, to the slow, inexorable processes that shape our world. You give it a little toss in your hand. Is it a long-lost alien artifact? A dragon's tear? Probably not. It's most likely just a stone that's been part of this landscape for millennia. But it's your interesting stone now. It has a story, even if you can only guess at the chapters. It's a tangible piece of the earth, a small anchor to the present moment, a contrast to the ephemeral nature of, say, that oddly compelling reality TV show you binged last week. This stone will outlast us all, a rather humbling thought, delivered with a gentle, stony indifference. And finally, you consider the soil itself. You didn't necessarily bring a clod of dirt with you in your pocket, though no judgment if you did. Some of us are just like that. But you recall kneeling down earlier, perhaps near where you found those seeds, and crumbling the earth between your fingers. You took a moment to really feel it, to smell it. Was it sandy, running through your fingers like time itself? Or was it heavy with clay, clumping together, holding its moisture? A bit like that stubborn relative everyone has. Or perhaps it was that perfect, dark, crumbly loam, the kind that gardeners dream about, smelling rich and alive, full of organic matter. That scent, that distinct earthy aroma, is called geosmin, produced by soil bacteria, and it's one of the most evocative smells, instantly connecting us to the very essence of growth and decay. You might have taken a small sample, if you were being particularly methodical, maybe in a little twist of paper, to compare with soil from another area. Understanding the soil is key to understanding the land. It dictates what can grow, how well it will grow, and ultimately, what kind C of ecosystem can thrive. Ancient civilizations knew this intimately. The Egyptians, for example, based their entire civilization around the annual flooding of the Nile, which deposited incredibly fertile silt, renewing the land year after year. They didn't have modern soil testing kits, but they had generations of observational knowledge. We, with our little kits from the garden center, are just continuing that tradition of trying to understand what the earth beneath our feet is telling us. You recall that patch of particularly vibrant green we saw, even though the surrounding area was a bit drier. The soil there was probably holding more nutrients, more moisture, It's a subtle language, the language of soil, but it speaks volumes if you're willing to listen, to feel, to smell. It's the foundation, quite literally, of everything we've been exploring, from the smallest insect to the tallest tree we leaned against earlier. These little collections, seeds of hope, a stone of ages, and the memory of the earth itself, they ground you, connecting you to the endless cycles of this quiet, breathing world. And so, having considered those more, shall we say, robust expressions of identity and status, we now drift into a quieter, more intimate space. You find yourself turning from the well-lit path, drawn towards the subtle allure of the overlooked, the almost forgotten. We're talking about those small treasures and keepsakes, the kind of things you might tuck away in a little wooden box, or perhaps find nestled in the back of a drawer. Their discovery a soft surprise, like finding an extra $5 in an old coat pocket, only infinitely more personal. Imagine, for a moment, you're holding a smooth stone. It's cool to the touch, isn't it? Perhaps it's a soft, milky white quartz, or a deep river gray slate, worn down by eons of water and friction until it fits perfectly into the curve of your palm. You rub your thumb over its surface, a repetitive, almost meditative gesture. This stone holds no monetary value. You couldn't trade it for a fancy coffee, let alone, you know, a small island. It's not going to magically solve your problems or make your Wi-Fi faster. And yet, you keep it. Why? Because maybe you picked it up on a beach during a moment of profound peace. The sound of the waves, the salty air, the feeling of sun on your skin, all somehow condensed into this small, tangible object. Or perhaps it was given to you by someone dear. A silent token passed from their hand to yours, imbuing it with a warmth that has nothing to do with its geological temperature. It's a tiny anchor to a feeling, a place, a person. It's the original fidget spinner, really, just without the questionable street cred. Then there's the feather. You might find one resting delicately on the grass, a wisp of downy gray, or perhaps a striking blue jay feather, its barbs still perfectly aligned. You pick it up, marveling at its lightness, its intricate design, a tiny miracle of natural engineering. It's so fragile. A breath could send it dancing away. What does it represent? Freedom. A fleeting thought. A reminder of the bird it came from, going about its day, blissfully unaware it's contributed to your tiny, sentimental hoard. Maybe you just liked the color. It's okay. Not every keepsake needs a 10-page backstory. Sometimes, beauty is its own reason. Like that time we talked about intricate weaving. Remember that the simple act of creation, or in this case, natural artistry, can be enough to captivate us. Or consider a simple carved token, not an elaborate sculpture, but something more unassuming. A little wooden bird, whittled by an unsteady hand, or a small clay charm, misshapen but undeniably heartfelt. Perhaps it's a coin from a foreign land you'll never visit again, kept not for its currency, but for the ghost of an adventure. The marks of the tool, the slight imperfections, these are what give it character, what make it yours. It's a connection to a human touch, a moment of craft or exchange. It's a far cry from the grand monuments we discussed earlier, but in its own way, just as significant to the individual. Historians still argue whether the earliest collections of pretty shells or unusual stones found in prehistoric sites represent a budding aesthetic sense, a form of primitive currency, or the very first stirrings of sentimental attachment. It's fascinating to think that our desire to hold on to these small personal mementos might be an echo of something incredibly ancient, a thread connecting us back through millennia. This impulse to keep such items isn't new. Of course, during the Victorian era, for instance, mourning jewelry became incredibly popular. People would wear lockets containing a snippet of a loved one's hair, or intricately woven hair bracelets, even jet beads carved into somber chi reflective designs. These weren't necessarily ostentatious pieces of bling. Their value was almost entirely emotional, a tangible way to keep a departed loved one close. It's a powerful testament to the human need for connection, even across the veil of absence. These small items become conduits for memory, for grief, for love. And think about the sheer variety of these personal treasures. A faded ticket stub from a concert where the music seemed to vibrate through your very bones, and where you maybe, just maybe, accidentally headbanged into the person next to you. A pressed flower, its color muted with time, tucked between the pages of a favorite book. A fragile relic of a sunny afternoon. A button, fallen from a beloved old coat, too special to discard. A child's first drawing, all scribbles and joy. These things are, by any objective measure, worthless. They are the ephemera of life, the detritus of daily existence. Yet, they possess a peculiar gravity, a pull that defies logic. They are, in essence, physical manifestations of our stories. It's said that Charles Dickens, the master storyteller himself, had a particular ivory letter opener he was very attached to. It wasn't especially valuable, but it had been a gift, and he'd used it to slice open countless letters, each containing its own little drama, its own world of correspondence. You can almost picture him, tapping it against his desk, lost in thought, wrestling with the fates of Pip or Oliver Twist. That little object was a constant companion in his creative life. It's a charming thought, isn't it? That even a mind teeming with such grand narratives found comfort or connection in a simple, everyday tool. It just goes to show that significance isn't always about scale or price tag. Sometimes, the quietest objects speak the loudest volumes to our hearts. And honestly, if you have a collection of, say, uniquely shaped pasta you found over the years, who am I to judge, as long as it sparks joy, or at least a confused smile? Right. These keepsakes, these tiny totems, they don't shout their importance. They whisper. They wait patiently in their quiet corners until you rediscover them. And for a moment, you're transported. You feel that cool stone in your hand. You see that feather drift. You trace the carving on that token, and the memories associated with them unfurl, soft and gentle, like old, familiar fabric. They are the unsung heroes of our personal museums, the quiet curators of our inner lives. And as you drift deeper now, perhaps you can almost feel one such treasure in your own hand, a small comforting weight. And so, with a bit more confidence in finding your way, perhaps, or at least a better appreciation for the subtle cues of the landscape, your thoughts might naturally turn to time. It's funny, isn't it? How utterly tethered we are to the little numbers on our phones, the sweep of a second hand. Out here, with nothing but the vast expanse above and the earth beneath, that digital precision vanishes, leaving a different kind of awareness in its place. You begin to feel the rhythm of the day, not in minutes and hours, but in the slow, deliberate arc of the sun. You glance upwards. The sun, that great golden disk, is your most immediate and obvious clock. When it first kisses the horizon, painting the sky in those soft, hopeful hues we talked about, you know the day is new. As it climbs higher and higher, you can feel its warmth intensifying on your skin. See the shadows around you shrink and sharpen. The moment it reaches its zenith, directly overhead, or as close to it as it gets, depending on the season and your latitude, that's your noon. The world seems to hold its breath for a moment. The light is at its most direct, its most revealing. Then, the slow descent begins, the shadows stretching out again, longer and longer, until the sun dips below the western edge. and the colors of sunset, those fiery farewells, signal the day's end. It's wonderfully simple, yet profoundly powerful. To refine this a little, you can use those very shadows. Find a relatively straight stick, perhaps one of those sturdy branches you decided not to use for your shelter. Plant it firmly in a clear odd T, flat patch of ground. Now you have a gnomon, the heart of a basic sundial. The ancient Egyptians, used towering obelisks as massive shadow clocks, their stone tips tracing the sun's journey and marking the hours for temple rituals and daily life. It's a rather grand version of your humble stick, but the principle is identical. As the sun moves, the shadow cast by your stick will creep across the ground. In the morning, it will be long and point westwards. As noon approaches, it will shorten, becoming very stubby, and then begin to lengthen again in the afternoon, now pointing eastwards. You could even mark positions with small stones, where the shadow falls when you wake, where it is when you estimate mid-morning, and so on. It won't give you minutes, but it gives you a sense of the day's progression, a framework for your activities. And if you need a quicker, rougher estimate of how much daylight you have left, especially as dusk approaches, you can use your own hand. Extend your arm fully towards the sun, just above the horizon. Now, hold your hand horizontally, fingers together, palm facing you, each finger width from the top of your index finger to the bottom of your pinky. Roughly corresponds to about 15 minutes of remaining daylight before the sun dips below that horizon line. So, 4 fingers means about an hour. It's not an exact science, of course. Finger sizes vary, and atmospheric conditions can play tricks. Don't set your primitive appointments by it too precisely. Meet me by the big rock when my shadow is 3 me-lengths long is probably more reliable than 4 finger widths till sunset. Still, it's a handy little trick, a personal, portable sundown estimator. Beyond the daily passage, the sun also paints the larger canvas of the seasons. You'll notice if you're observant, and by now, observation is becoming second nature, isn't it? That the sun's noonday height changes. In the peak of summer, it climbs much higher in the sky, tracing a longer, more generous arc, giving you those long, warm days. Correspondingly, your stick sundial's shadow at noon will be much shorter in summer. Come winter, the sun hangs lower. Even at midday, its arc shallower, its light a little less intense, and the days are noticeably shorter. The noon shadow from your stick will be significantly longer. These subtle shifts, the solstices marking the longest and shortest days, the equinoxes where day and night are roughly equal. These are the grand celestial metronomes. Nature, too, is an open book of seasonal time. The very plants around you, the ones you might be relying on for food or medicine, are living calendars. You see the first tiny buds appearing on bare branches. Spring is whispering. Then come the flowers, a riot of color, followed by the development of fruits or seeds. The vibrant greens of summer slowly give way to the golds, reds, and browns of autumn, and the leaves begin to fall, preparing the trees for winter's rest. Animal behavior shifts dramatically too. You might hear different bird songs as migratory species arrive or depart. You'll notice insects becoming more or less active. The squirrels, furiously bearing nuts, are a pretty good sign autumn is here, or that they're just having a particularly anxious Tuesday. It's a 50-50 really. But collectively, these signs are unmistakable. The chill in the air, the first frost on the ground, the way water sources behave. All these are threads in the seasonal tapestry. And what about aids you can carry with you? Something more tangible than just observation simplicity is key here. Remember that piece of cordage you so painstakingly made? You could tie a knot in it each morning when you wake. A simple, effective day counter. It's like the original subscription model. But instead of monthly fees, you just add another knot. Much more manageable, I'd say. Though customer service might be a bit slow. This humble knotted string has a surprisingly sophisticated history. For a truly quirky tidbit, consider the quipu of the Inca Empire. These were complex arrangements of knotted strings, often made of cotton or camelid fibers, used for collecting data and keeping records. Everything from census figures to historical narratives, and quite possibly, calendrical information. Yours is far simpler, but it connects you to that ancient human need to mark time's passage. Alternatively, you could carry a small pouch, perhaps made from that animal hide we discussed, with a collection of tiny pebbles. Each day, you transfer one pebble to another pouch, or simply discard one. Or you might make small notches on the handle of a tool, or on a dedicated stick. The method isn't as important as the consistency. This rhythmic daily act can be quite grounding, a small ritual that connects you to the flow of time when all other anchors are gone. Of course, interpreting the past often involves looking at how ancient peoples might have marked these grander cycles. Think of those enigmatic stone circles and alignments found across the globe. Like Stonehenge, historians still argue whether some prehistoric alignments of stones were primarily for calendrical purposes, tracking solstices and equinoxes for agricultural or ritual schedules, or had deeper ritualistic meanings, or perhaps, as is often the case, a bit of both. Your own needs are more immediate, more personal, but you're tapping into that same ancient impulse to understand, to predict, to situate yourself within the grand, turning wheel of days and seasons. Knowing roughly what time it is helps you plan your foraging, decide when to seek shelter, or gauge how long you have to complete a task before darkness or cold sets in. Knowing the season helps you anticipate changes in food availability, weather patterns, and the very behavior of the world around you. It's not just about abstract knowledge, it's about survival and a certain quiet comfort that comes from feeling in sync with the world's natural pulse. All right, let's gently lift this next farmer's pouch. You can almost feel the texture just by looking. Can't you? And as your fingers brush against it, you begin to notice things. Subtle cues that whisper a little more about the person who carried it, little hints of their status, or maybe even where they called home. It's not about finding a Gucci logo stitched into the deerskin. Obviously, that would be anachronistic, to say the least, and probably result in a very confused historian or a very wealthy time-traveling peasant. No, these are far quieter signals. Take the pouch itself. Remember that basic, functional sack we imagined earlier? Perhaps made of rough, undyed hide, stitched with thick, pragmatic sinew or linen thread. Now, this one. This one feels different. The leather is still sturdy, still built for a life of hard work, but it's perhaps a little more supple. You can tell it's been treated with more care, maybe rubbed with animal fats more regularly, giving it a deeper, richer patina, a soft sheen under the imaginary torchlight. The stitching, too, might be finer, the holes more precise, the thread itself of a slightly better quality. It's not machine perfect, of course. This is still handwork. But there's an artistry here, a practiced hand that speaks of either a bit more time to dedicate to the task, or perhaps the ability to trade for something made by a more skilled leather worker. Maybe our farmer here had a particularly good year with the barley, or their prize pig fetched a handsome sum at market. Enough for a small upgrade, a quiet nod to prosperity. You might even find a simple form of decoration, nothing garish, mind you, no bedazzling, but perhaps a tooled line running along the edge of the flap, or a very basic geometric pattern pressed into the leather when it was wet. These little touches, they take time, and time for a medieval farmer was a precious commodity, almost as valuable as the harvest itself. So, a bit of simple decoration could imply that tiny bit of surplus, that fractional breathing room in a life often lived on the edge. Or perhaps our farmer had a knack for it, a creative streak that found an outlet in these small ways. It's like today, isn't it? Some people are happy with a plain phone case. Others want one with a picture of their cat. Or, I don't know, Nicolas Cage. It's a little expression of self, or status. And what about the closure? Instead of a simple leather thong tied in a knot, perhaps this pouch has a toggle made of polished bone, or a smoothly carved piece of antler. It's still functional, but it's just that little bit nicer. It feels more deliberate. These small material upgrades aren't screaming wealth, but they are murmuring. Things are all right. Maybe even a bit better than just all right. It's the medieval equivalent of having the slightly upgraded trim package on your Ford Focus. Doesn't make you a king, but it's a small comfort. Now, let's peek inside. Very carefully. We're looking for those subtle indicators among the more standard contents we've discussed. That whetstone, for instance. Is it just a rough piece of sandstone? Or is it a finer-grained stone? Perhaps one known to come from a specific, slightly more distant quarry, indicating trade or travel. A sharper, better-maintained edge on their utility knife. Remember that all-important tool that could be the result of a better whetstone and a little more time to care for it. The food items, too, could offer clues. We talked about dried meat or hard cheese, but what if, tucked into a corner, you find a small twist of linen holding a few dried berries that are a little more exotic for the immediate area, or a piece of fruit leather that's a bit sweeter, a bit more carefully prepared than the standard stuff. These aren't banquet foods, but they represent a small luxury, a little diversity in a diet that was often monotonous. Perhaps our farmer's wife was particularly skilled at preserving, or they lived near an old Roman road, still a conduit for small trade goods, even centuries later. In fact, the maintenance and use of Roman roads for trade and travel long after the empire fell is a mainstream historical fact. They were just too useful to abandon entirely, becoming the arteries for medieval commerce. And what about something not strictly essential? A single, smooth, interestingly shaped pebble, carried perhaps as a good luck charm, or a tiny, crudely carved wooden animal, no bigger than your thumb. These items offer no practical benefit, yet they are carried. This suggests a life with just enough margin to allow for sentiment, or for the small effort of crafting such a trinket. Historians still argue whether such personal, non-utilitarian items found in otherwise very practical assemblages represent deeply held personal beliefs, simple whimsy, or even gifts exchanged with loved ones. It's a fascinating little window into the human element. Then there's the regional aspect. The very material of the pouch could be a clue. Is it deer hide, common in forested areas, or perhaps a tougher sheepskin, more prevalent in upland grazing regions? If you were to find, say, a pouch made from sealskin, you'd have a pretty strong hint you weren't dealing with a farmer from landlocked Bohemia. The type of wood used for that toggle, if there is one, or even for the handle of a small awl, is it oak, ash, or something more specific to a particular local environment? Sometimes, the quirky tidbit is in the style of make. For instance, certain remote alpine communities developed very specific ways of curing leather or even decorating small wooden items, almost like a local dialect in craftsmanship. You might not be able to pinpoint the exact village, but you could get a general sense of, this feels like it came from the northern valleys, or this has the touch of the coastal folk. It's like trying to guess where someone's from by their accent. But with crafts, is that a Yorkshire whittle or a Wessex carve? I wonder. Probably not something they actually said, but you get the idea. Even the tinderbox contents could vary. The type of flint might differ geologically from one region to another. Some areas had flint that was easier to work or produced a better spark. Knowledge of these local resources was vital. Imagine finding a piece of iron pyrite, fool's gold, used as the striker instead of steel. This was a known, though perhaps less efficient, method in areas where good quality steel was harder to come by or more expensive. It's these little variations, these adaptations to the local environment and economy, that can paint a richer picture. The presence of a single, worn coin, perhaps. Not enough to signify great wealth, but maybe it's a denomination that was more common in a particular trading town. Or it's made of silver from a known regional mine. It could be kept for emergency, or as a memento, or even just because it was shiny. The interpretation can be tricky, but it's another piece of the puzzle. It's not about finding a treasure chest, but about appreciating the subtle language of everyday objects, how they can tell you a story about a life lived, the small triumphs, the local connections, the quiet dignity of a person making their way in a challenging world. You just have to learn to listen to their whispers. And so you see, as we lay out these small, unassuming objects, these remnants from a life lived, they begin to tell a story far grander than their individual forms suggest. It's like emptying out the junk drawer of history, isn't it? Except every item here, every fragment, pulsates with a quiet significance. Remember that slightly bent, discolored coin we examined earlier? The one with the almost entirely effaced monarch, or the smooth, worrystone texture of that dark pebble. Cool even now to your imagined touch. Each one is a silent testament. You begin to feel the weight, not just of the objects themselves, but of the days and nights they accompanied, the hopes and anxieties they absorbed. You can almost picture the hand that reached for them. A hand, no doubt, that knew hard labor. The sheer practicality of so much of what a pocket like this would contain speaks volumes. That trusty knife, for instance, remember its carefully sharpened edge, the way the wooden handle was worn smooth in exactly the right places for a firm grip. It wasn't just for show, not a fancy accessory. It was for cutting bread, mending a strap, whittling a peg, maybe even for a bit of impromptu defense if a shadowy lane felt a little too shadowy. The original multi-tool, long before a certain Swiss army decided to add a tiny, largely useless toothpick. Then there's the flint and steel, or perhaps that small, tightly sealed tinderbox we speculated about, essential for warmth, for cooking, for light in a world where darkness fell with an unnerving totality. These weren't conveniences. They were survival. Every item had a purpose, often multiple, a far cry from the single-use mentality we sometimes fall into today. You'd find no novelty keychains here, unless that novelty was, say, a particularly good fire starter. This practicality bleeds directly into the evidence of a hard-working existence. The wear on these items isn't the gentle patina of disuse. It's the abrasion of constant utility. Think about the few coins, perhaps tucked into that small leather pouch we unfolded. They wouldn't have jingled loosely. They were too precious. Each one represented effort, a transaction, a service rendered, maybe a day's labor, or a small item sold at market. It's interesting. The average laborer in, say, 18th century England might earn enough in a day to buy a few loaves of bread, so every penny was accounted for. These coins weren't for frivolous spending. They were for sustenance, for the bare necessities. You can almost feel the calluses on the fingers that counted them, the slight anxiety before a purchase. A far cry from just tapping your phone, which, let's be honest, feels like its own kind of magic sometimes, especially when the payment actually goes through on the first try. And then, woven amongst the purely functional, you find the threads of something else, something a little more ethereal, the superstitious, the hopeful, the talismans against the unknown. Remember that sprig of dried herb we found, tucked into a fold of fabric, or that curiously shaped bit of metal, too soft for a tool, too personal for mere decoration. These are the whispers of a mind navigating a world filled with uncertainties, where a sudden illness, a stroke of bad luck, or an ill-intentioned glance could have serious consequences. People carried charms, amulets, fragments of scripture, or items believed to hold protective powers. It's like carrying a crystal today, except this one might have actually, been found by the person instead of bought on Etsy after a particularly stressful Mercury retrograde. For many, these weren't just quaint beliefs, they were an active part of their spiritual and emotional toolkit. It's a fascinating aspect of daily life that often gets overlooked. For instance, sailors, who lived a notoriously perilous existence, were renowned for their superstitions. Carrying a gold earring wasn't just for show. It was believed it would pay for a proper Christian burial if they drowned and washed ashore. A quirky, if rather macabre, tidbit is that some people believed carrying a specific type of bean, like a Job's tear, could ward off rheumatism or even witchcraft. You can imagine someone carefully selecting their pocket companions each morning. Knife for work, coin for market, bean for not getting cursed by the grumpy-looking baker. Historians still argue whether the profound reliance on such charms and rituals represented a deeply ingrained spiritual conviction, or was, perhaps, more of a societal habit, a comforting tradition passed down through generations, especially in times before widespread scientific understanding could explain the more frightening aspects of life and death. Was it fervent belief, or was it the historical equivalent of knocking on wood? Perhaps it was a blend of both, a pragmatic approach to covering all bases, both seen and unseen. You'd have your practical tools for the physical world, and your spiritual tools for the other bits. What's truly compelling is how these two worlds, the practical and the superstitious, often weren't neatly separated. They coexisted within the same pocket, within the same person. A farmer might use the most sensible agricultural techniques known to him, yet still plant by the phases of the moon or carry a thunderstone, a fossilized sea urchin, or ancient stone tool in his pocket, believing it protected him from lightning. The same hand that expertly wielded a tool might also trace a sign against the evil eye. The boundary was porous, and the contents of a pocket reflect this beautiful malt's complex human tendency to blend logic with hope, reason with ritual. You start to see not just a collection of objects, but a reflection of a worldview, a snapshot of the human condition in a particular time and place. These items were extensions of the self, chosen with care, carried with intent. They speak of resilience, of making do, of facing the world with whatever tools, physical or spiritual, one could muster. The intimacy of it is quite profound. These are the things kept closest to the body, silent companions through the daily grind and the quiet moments of fear or hope. They represent the small personal strategies for navigating life's challenges. And as you gaze upon this humble assortment, you realize this pocket wasn't just a container. It was a microcosm of a life of tangible effort, where every day brought its demands and its small victories, a life where the seen and unseen worlds were acknowledged, and where a few carefully chosen items could mean the difference between a good day and a bad one, or provide a sliver of comfort against the vast unknown. It's a quiet, powerful narrative, all held within the confines of a few square inches of worn fabric. And now, as our journey through this little pocket world draws to a close, allow the images to soften, The sharp edges of the knife, the glint of the coin, the texture of the charm, all gently blurring in your mind's eye. The weight of these everyday treasures, once so immediate, begins to lighten, drifting like dust motes in a fading sunbeam. The story they told of toil and belief and the simple act of carrying on now settles around you like a warm, familiar blanket. Let the sounds of that distant life, the clink of a tool, the murmur of a prayer, recede into a peaceful quiet. There's nothing more to discern here, only the lingering sense of connection, a faint echo of a hand reaching into a pocket, long ago. Just breathe and let the quiet embrace you. Rest now.